Jared Goff is projected for about 17 fantasy points. And Goff last year, was quarterback 14 in fantasy points per game. Goff was 10 in total fantasy points. And this was a spike week king. Goff was, top 5 in terms of rate of top 5 weeks. So when we're talking about a player who in the right environment could absolutely go off, this could be a massive shootout. And we've seen shootouts before with Jared Goff in Arrowhead. You remember a couple years ago when it was Mahomes versus Goff and the Rams versus the Chiefs, and it ended up being like a 120-point game or something ridiculous. It was one of the greatest regular season games we've seen in some time, just a back and forth, and even there were some defensive scores. But Jared Goff can enter into the ring of scoring a lot of fantasy points, and he's a spike week king. I've been preaching mid-round Jared Goff this offseason because not only can he get into the shootouts, but in dome games, this one isn't a dome game, but in dome games, this is a player who had good offensive line, good weapons, and I think he is a start. He's a low-end quarterback one for me in this matchup with mid-pack quarterback one upside. I don't think you can get higher than about quarterback 6. And looking at his game logs from last year, we did see a quarterback one overall finish weekly, week 4, and that was against Seattle, where Goff threw for 4 touchdowns and 378 yards. But that was in a dome, if you remember. So that was like the TJ Hawkinson game where Hawkinson went absolutely hog wild. But he had a top 8 week, top number 1 week. He had a top 4 week. He had a 25-point game where he was the quarterback 2 overall. He was quarterback 7. So Jared Goff has within his range of outcomes being like a quarterback 6, 7, 8 on the week. And I think that is an appropriate ranking for him. Maybe I'll move him just a little bit lower. I'll have to look at where the consensus is because I want to be higher than consensus on Jared Goff, but I also recognize that sometimes the consensus can get wacky and wild. And this is one of the higher, over unders. So if we're putting ourselves in a position, to start Jared Goff, I think Goff is a start pretty easily over the likes of a Russell Wilson. I think you start Goff over Anthony Richardson here in week 1. I do like Richardson, but let's be real. Jared Goff has the spike week potential. This is the highest over under. We've seen spike weeks before from him. Amon-Ra St. Brown should be active for this game. And yeah, I'm really in on getting some Jared Goff as a low-end quarterback 1. And hopefully, if you were streaming off the waiver wire, Jared Goff is a perfect pick him off the waiver wire and just plug and start. This is by far one of the highest scoring games of the season that we're projecting for, much less for this week. So you want pieces of this game, and Jared Goff is probably a pretty cheap way to get in on this game. Plus, taking another view of it, and I'm going to talk about this as well when we talk about the running backs, but the Chiefs are expected to miss Chris Jones. Like, Chris Jones is not going to play. And Jones was the number 1 defensive interior lineman for among all defensive interior linemen per PFF. And instead, the Chiefs are replacing him with the 99th ranked and 143rd ranked PFF graded defensive interior lineman. So there's not going to be as much pressure against a really good offensive line that the Lions have. I think Goff is a pretty solid start as a back-end quarterback 1 if you're streaming quarterbacks.